Hi everyone, welcome back to the 21 and Sensory podcast with me, Emily. On today's episode, my special guest is the lovely Georgia Holliday. Georgia describes herself as an ADHD and autistic writer, poet, and lifelong student of words. Her work explores feminism, neurodivergence, chronic illness, and the glorious messiness of life. Georgia is also an English Lit and creative writing student, a wife, dog mum, content creator, and obsessive reader. Now, you might know Georgia from her social media presence, where she has over 63,000 followers on TikTok and almost 15,000 followers on Instagram. So, Georgia, would you like to say hello?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast today, Emily. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, me too. I'm very interested to talk about how you juggle the many things I introduced that you do.
That is a great question. How do any of us juggle all of it?
Yeah.
I think a lot of the times, like when I kind of hear out loud all the stuff that I do and that I am, I'm kind of like, oh, yeah, that actually sounds like a lot. But
Yeah.
like in my mind, I like don't do anything. I think that's because I had to stop working last year, like summer last year, because of my chronic illness, fibromyalgia, and because of burnout. So it all just kind of got too much. So I feel like because I'm not sort of like officially employed, even though I do a lot of other things, I do a lot of content creation for social media, I write, I'm studying for a degree, all of those things. I think it's definitely like a imposter syndrome thing, and
Yeah.
sort of I think probably a lot of people feel that way. We're so influenced by capitalism that we're like, unless we're doing something that earns loads of money, then we're not valuable and we're not productive. So there's definitely elements of that going on. But in terms of like juggling it all, I'm very lucky and privileged that I am in a position where I don't need to work right now. Um, and I'm very grateful to have a husband that is able to support us with his job. I do, some content creation that is paid work, but all in all, I don't really earn any money. So I am mainly focusing on my degree right now, which is English literature and creative writing. I'm doing it through the Open University, so I can do it online.
Oh, okay.
So that works a lot better for me because it's online, so I can stay at home, and it's part-time, so I can do it sort of at my own pace. I did go to university when I was of university age, which I no longer am. I'm 28. I went to, but it was a dance school. So I initially trained as a dancer, which I obviously am not now. I went to quite a well-known dance school in Liverpool, and I had a part scholarship to go there, but I ended up having to drop out after my first year because I was in a lot of pain. I was really, really struggling with depression. And what I now know is that I am also autistic and have ADHD. So that layered on top of everything just made university not the place for me. So I dropped out after my first year, and have since been diagnosed with ADHD, with depression, with fibromyalgia. I ended up in A&E quite a few times because the dancing was so full on. It was like 8 till 4 every single day. My body just kind of couldn't really take it. And doctors were sort of saying to me, look, if you keep on this way, you're not going to be walking by the time you're 30. So I kind of thought, yeah, not ideal. So
No, that's so sad because
yeah,
it sounded like it was a bit of a passion as well as something that you really wanted to do.
100%. I think growing up, I now would sort of say that dancing was definitely like a special interest for me. I did it from like a very young age, and I did it at college, and I did a dance BTEC kind of dance A level, and then I went to dance school, and all I did was like dance classes and wasn't very social in any other capacity. That's kind of all I did. But I do feel as though it was the right decision to leave because I'm not a competitive person, and the dance world is very competitive. So that kind of didn't really fit with me. And it also just, it just sent my mental health really, really downhill. And I really, really struggled with depression. So it was definitely the right decision for me to leave. And I don't kind of have any regrets in that sense. I'm not kind of like, oh, I failed, I dropped out. I absolutely think that was the right thing for me to do. And I think that it's kind of led me on the path where I am now, which, although in many ways is very difficult and a challenge with my various disabilities, I'm grateful for where I am now and all that I have learnt about myself, even if it is hard to juggle and manage most of the time.
I mean, it sounds like, I mean, I'd be gutted to be told, like, you know, you really have to stop something you love, but it sounds like really you made the best decision in terms of your, not only your physical health but also your mental health, and that you managed to find, you know, this course through the Open University that you wanted to kind of pursue. Like, it
Yeah.
sounds like you've tried to look after yourself as much as possible. However, like, you know, like, heartbreaking that must be, because I know how much of a commitment dance can be. It really does, like, it seems to become people's lives.
Oh,
Like,
100%. Like,
yeah.
with something that is so like physically and mentally draining, you have to be all in. And I think I realized I wasn't all in because it was a lot for me mentally and physically, and I couldn't keep going with that. Um, and it's quite weird because at the time, I didn't like, I wasn't. I know, like you said, oh, you know, it's really heartbreaking. At the time, I didn't feel that way. I think I was just so deep into like burnout physically and mentally that I was like, I can't. This is the only option. The only option is to drop out. Like, that was the only option for me. So I guess I didn't have like a huge sort of uh, emotional response, I guess, to having to stop doing it. I feel like I just knew that it was something I had to do. It wasn't really a choice. So although it was upsetting, I like, even at the time I was like, I'm okay with this. I'm good with this. This is fine. So I feel very like lucky in that way, because I know that some people in that position, it would be absolutely devastating. And at the time, because it was such a special interest, there was no plan B. there
Yeah.
was no backup option, even though all through school and college my dad was like, make sure you do have a plan B, make sure you have a backup plan, and don't just do dance at college. So I ignored all that and just did dance. And ended up, yeah, with basically no other sort of qualifications or training or experience in anything else. So I kind of thought, well, the next closest thing is fitness. So I then trained to be a personal trainer, and I worked in a couple of gyms, which I absolutely hated. And then I started my own business doing personal training for clients, which I did for several years, which then kind of turned into like a personal training and coaching business,
Oh,
which,
okay.
yeah, which again I stopped last year just because burnout kind of reared its head again. So I think what I've kind of learned about myself in the last few years is that where I have these opposing sort of sides of my brain, my ADHD brain and my autistic brain, my ADHD brain wants to do everything. It has all the ideas. It's like, go, 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 go. Let's think of idea. Okay, cool. Let's turn that into a whole fucking business. And this is my life path. And it's going to, you know, be extremely successful. And then the autistic side of my brain is like, whoa, this is all like way too much. Something that I really sort of, I guess, struggle with in terms of being autistic is the overwhelm, is I burn out very easily. I am very sensory sensitive to the world. And it's only within the last few years that I've realized that's what it was, because I am autistic, rather than just being, I don't know, like too sensitive or too emotional or just weak or I don't know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I feel like having these, I guess, quote unquote labels. I know some people really don't like labels, but for me personally, and maybe this is my autistic brain, I like the labels. I like knowing that's that and that's that and that's that, because it puts my whole life into perspective. And it allows me to really understand myself and have a lot more compassion and patience with myself, rather than immediately jumping to, oh, you had to drop out of uni because you're shit or you're this or you're that. It allows me to give myself more grace.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you kind of touched upon the few diagnoses that you have. Could you kind of explain like what order they came in and
Yeah.
what kind of led you to each one, or if they led to each other, kind of thing?
Yeah. So I feel like anyone that is neurodivergent and they're kind of like, you almost feel like you're like collecting Pokemon.
Yeah. I get you.
And looking backwards, it all makes sense. It's like connecting dots and it's like, okay. But when you're doing it forwards, it's all very, very confusing and very overwhelming and very frustrating. So the first thing that I guess, sought help with or went to my doctors about was my physical pain. So I was always in pain every day. I would have very regular headaches almost daily. I would like sometimes slur my words, and I would like be very fatigued all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I initially went to the doctors about that when I was 17. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 2019. So what would have that been? I'm 28 now. Oh, maths is not my topic, hence why I trained in dance. Like 26? No, 25? Is that right?
Early 20s.
Yeah,
That counts.
yeah. So, it took essentially around a decade for me to actually be diagnosed with something. And through that whole period of time, I had doctors and specialists and physios, and I had MRI scans and x-rays and CAT scans and osteopaths and anyone you can think of. I saw them and they all told me, you're fine, your bloods are normal, you're too young to be sick, you're too healthy to, you're, and by healthy they mean thin.
Mm-hmm.
You're a dancer, so you should be fine, etc., etc. So basically for like a whole decade I was just completely gaslit, to the point where like now I just have so little trust in the medical system, which is also why I'm such a strong advocate for self-diagnosis, which we can talk about more later if you want to. But for so long I was gaslit, and you then start to gaslight yourself and you start to think, oh, am I making this up? Like, am I pretending? Like, am I actually in pain? Maybe I'm just fine, maybe I'm just overreacting, maybe I'm oversensitive, etc., etc. So yeah, the first diagnosis that I had was fibromyalgia, which is my chronic illness, which I got in 2019. I then got diagnosed with hypermobility, which is very common amongst neurodivergent people.
Yeah.
I then, at some point in there, I got diagnosed with depression. I can't remember when that was. So looking back, adding all these things up, you start to think, that's an awful lot of things that are very comorbid with neurodivergence. So, like, in my opinion, I think if someone gets a certain diagnosis, whether it's a certain chronic illness or hypermobility spectrum disorder, I feel as though they should also maybe flag ADHD and autism specifically, because those are the things that are very sort of common with those other diagnoses.
Yeah.
So I had those, and I kind of was still really, really struggling at this point. I had tried lots of medication for my fibro, nothing had worked. fibre, unfortunately, is one of those things that they don't know much about. They can't really do anything for it. There's no cure. They don't really know what causes it. So, it's a bit of a lost cause, really, which I have been told by a doctor before. So that's not the nicest thing to hear.
No.
And then came the pandemic, 2020. And I, same as everyone, got on TikTok. And all these sort of ADHD videos started coming up, and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I then met up with a friend who I knew through Instagram, and we'd been friends for a while on Instagram, but we met up in real life, and she has ADHD. And we were just chatting about stuff, and I was, you like just connect with some people straight away, and there's just that immediate like bond. I get you, you get me, I feel very seen. It was that. And I was sort of saying things, and she was like, yeah, like I'm the same, I do that. I'm like, oh wow, it's really nice to know that like I'm not the only person that does that. She's like, yeah, but I have ADHD. So she suggested to me, she was like, if this is overstepping, please tell me, but have you ever thought about the possibility that you have ADHD? And I was like, not really, because I, probably the same as a lot of people, had the stereotype image in my head of a naughty young boy in school, like that couldn't sit still, like very stereotypical.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't think so, because I didn't realize how it could manifest in girls and women, and how it could look differently for people that are high masking. So I started to sort of look into it, and I was like, oh shit, this is 100% me. I was like, this is absolutely me. Every single part of the DSM, which I think is outdated, but anyway, every part of that, I was like, this is just my life. Like, I just thought this was normal. It's not, apparently. So after I did a lot of research, I am a very obsessive researcher. Once I cling onto something, that's it. I go all the way down the rabbit hole and find out everything that I can. A lot of my like friends and family kind of like say I'm like a research master. Like I just love researching things, which I now realize is also a very like ADHD autistic thing. So I think I did probably research for over a year, probably like a year and a half, and then began to feel more comfortable identifying as ADHD or self-diagnosing, whatever language you prefer to use. And that's when I then went to my doctor with all the information, and I said, look, this is what I'm experiencing. I've looked up ADHD. It's, I believe I have ADHD. Can you please refer me? And that was in October 2021. And then I got diagnosed with ADHD in October 2022. So a year later. That is actually quite a short time for the NHS waiting list. I just got very lucky, and I got someone's cancelled appointment. They literally called me up, and they were like, hi, we have an assessment available next week. Do you want to do it? And I was like, that's really soon, but yes, okay.
Yeah.
So I had my ADHD assessment. My assessor was like, you are very textbook ADHD. I can't believe this has been missed. It's very obvious to me that you're ADHD. Some of the questions she didn't even bother asking me, because she was like, I know that this is like, I can see that you're, you can't sit still, or you're fidgeting or whatever. So she kind of diagnosed me it was a video call with ADHD. And I then went through the process of like medication and trying to find the right one. So I'm now medicated for my ADHD, and that has helped a lot. But between being referred to the ADHD people and diagnosis, I also started to look into autism as well, because although I really fully resonated with ADHD, I felt as though there was something else that, like, within my experience that wasn't explained by ADHD. So certain things about myself and how I was and how I behaved and thought, etc., wasn't explained by ADHD. And I was talking to my friend that I mentioned earlier who first brought it up to me, and I said, oh, do you do this? Do you do this? And she's like, no, I don't. And I was like, oh, okay, so maybe that's not ADHD, maybe that's something else. And then that's when I started looking into autism, and that then kind of very much filled in the gaps of what I was experiencing. And I was like, okay, this makes total sense. I didn't really at the time know that you could have both. But obviously I now know it's very common to have both. So again, down the rabbit hole, loads and loads of researching, and people are so against self-diagnosis because they think people just go on TikTok, watch one 15-second video and then just declare that they are autistic or have ADHD or whatever else it is. And that is just not the case. And it infuriates me, but also it makes me laugh because it's like, why would anyone want to just whack that label on themselves when there's so much stigma surrounding it? Like, it's not something that people just do for fun, that they just do lightly. Self-diagnosis usually comes after months, if not years, of self-research. And by that, I mean, yes, being on social media, watching videos and watching creators that are neurodivergent and relating to their lived experience, but it also means reading books and listening to podcasts and talking to people in real life with lived experience and looking at the DSM and all of these different things. It's not just watching like a 15-second video. So for me, it was a very thorough, in-depth researching project before I self-diagnosed. And I am still self-diagnosed autistic. And currently I don't feel the need to pursue a medical diagnosis for my autism. Just because where I am right now, I'm happy with where I am. I'm very comfortable with my self-diagnosis. Initially, I kind of thought, yep, I definitely want a diagnosis because then people will believe me. But I realized that's actually not the case because even with my ADHD diagnosis, some people don't believe me. So, it's wanting a diagnosis so other people believe you is not a good enough reason, in my opinion. For some people, if you want that and you feel like you need that medical input to kind of like put your mind at ease, that's totally cool. Totally respect that. And self-diagnosis is so valid. So, and that is sort of widely recognized within the autism community. And then within my ADHD assessment, my assessor brought up Tourette's. So this is what I mean when I say it's like collecting fucking Pokemon. Because so my tics is something that I have always been very aware of, but always been extremely self-conscious of and extremely embarrassed by. I got picked on a lot for it in school, even though I was like trying to suppress them within an inch of my life. People would be like, oh, why are you making those, weird faces? Or why are you doing this? Or, oh, and it's like, it's something that even now I'm still very like, it makes me really uncomfortable that I have it, even though I know that it's something I cannot control the same way that I cannot control my ADHD. But I think in my mind, there's something that just seems as though Tourette's would be less accepted by a lot of people. And that is, not just something that I'm making up in my head. There are certain, things that do hold more stigma. Unfortunately, autism and Tourette's syndrome are one of those. Don't have, again, a medical diagnosis for Tourette's, but my ADHD assessor pretty much kind of said, we spoke a little bit about my tics. She said, are you aware of them? I said, yeah. She was like, how long have you had them? I said, basically since I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. So a couple of decades, quite a long time.
Yeah.
And, when looking into it a bit more, I've kind of suspected in the past, oh, maybe I have Tourette's, but it's almost like I was too scared to look into it, because if I did that, then it would be real and I would have it, even though it makes no difference to the tics I experience. It was like a weird kind of, I don't know, brain block. But now, obviously, looking into it, it's definitely something that I identify as. For Tourette's, you basically have to have both physical, which is like motor tics, and like, what's the word?
What, like vocal?
Vocal, yes,
Yeah.
sorry, vocal tics. There you go, ADHD brain.
Okay, I didn't realise you needed kind of
Yes.
to cover both.
Yeah, so for it to be Tourette's, it is both motor and vocal. If you just have like one or the other, generally it's another tic disorder.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of like an umbrella term, which Tourette's comes under. But yeah, Tourette's is the motor and vocal. So I remember, like, from quite a young age, my mum would be like, "What's that sound?" And it would just be me like making little funny noises in my throat or something. And to begin with, I didn't realise that I did it until it was pointed out. So I think that's probably one reason why I'm quite like self-conscious about it. And Tourette's is something that is, like, my tics are made worse when attention is drawn to it, or if I'm in a stressful situation, or things like that. So I do try to mask it a lot. I shouldn't, and I wish I didn't feel like I had to. And it's slowly something that I'm really trying to unmask, as I have been doing with my ADHD and autism. I feel a lot more comfortable unmasking with my ADHD and autism, but my Tourette's is something that is newer to me, and something that I am, I guess, less comfortable being really open and vulnerable about, because it's like the one thing that I was like, I'm never going to tell anyone about this. I'm always going to hide this, which obviously is not a healthy thing to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, now I'm kind of like, well, I tell the internet literally everything else, so I might as well, might as well be honest about this too. And as a content creator, it's quite difficult to suppress every single tic in a video, because I would spend a lot of time before I was sort of open about it, rewatching back content and refilming it, because there was a tic that was noticeable, which probably wouldn't have even been picked up by someone watching it, but to me, I was like, oh god, I can't put that out. So that's a lot of energy, and it's very draining to try and suppress that all the time.
Yeah, I bet.
So yeah, I think that just about covers everything.
Like you say, it is like, I get what you mean about kind of collecting kind of diagnoses, but it really does bring you clarity whether or not it's a self-diagnosis or a medical diagnosis. Like, I think it's so important, because it really does, I don't know, I think it helps you to be kinder to yourself, just knowing this stuff about you. And I think you learn to kind of be like, that there's a reason why I feel like this, or why, your childhood was like difficult and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
it does really help.
Absolutely. And I feel as though, like, some people don't want labels, or don't like labels. For me, it was absolutely essential to have them, because I was given other labels anyway, by other people, by myself, lazy, stupid, too sensitive, over emotional, rude, blunt. I was given all of these labels by myself and other people anyway. So to have the correct labels is like so empowering, but also knowing these things about myself has literally saved my life. Like, I do think that if I didn't have this information about myself, I quite possibly wouldn't be here, because it's extremely distressing, and depressing, like feeling like you're so broken and not knowing why, and just thinking there is inherently something wrong with you and it is just purely like a character flaw.
Mhm.
So having this information about myself has, saved my life.
It's really it's really sad to hear that, like, and I've heard it from so many people, like, coming on the podcast, is that you have to get to a breaking point, or you have to
Yeah.
get to, like, a burnout, or
Mm-hmm.
a real kind of mental health issue in order to realize this stuff about yourself, or get someone else in a professional capacity to realize this about you,
Yeah.
and then find out. Like, you shouldn't have to reach such a horrible and dark place to then realize something that can really, really help. But
Yeah,
yeah, it comes so
absolutely.
late.
It does. And I think that's why, for a lot of people, the pandemic and all of the lockdowns was a real sort of, I guess, catalyst for people like really looking into things about themselves. Because
Yeah.
often with like ADHD and autism, when there is sort of a big change in structure or routine, that is when those traits will kind of become more apparent. So
Hmm.
that is what happened for me when, obviously, like, I couldn't go to work and we had to stay inside. I started to realize that, oh wow, okay, I didn't realize I did that all the time. And my awareness was like sort of forced to look at these things within myself. And there was a lot of sort of just, I guess, looking at those things that perhaps I had sort of known were there, but had maybe avoided or
Hmm.
pushed through, or, other things that we're generally taught to do in a capitalist society. And I really had the time to sort of like sit with it. And I think that's probably the same for a lot of people, which is why it feels like, oh, everyone has autism now, everyone is ADHD. And it's just not the case. It's just because there was this kind of like collective shift in awareness, I think, because we had this big change in structure, and we all sort of lost our routine. And
Hmm.
that is a big sort of trigger for, potentially making those traits, I don't necessarily want to say worse, maybe like more noticeable to you.
Yeah, and I guess, like, just living with family or a partner or something like that, if you are together pretty much 24/7,
Mm.
you might start to notice that stuff, whereas if you were going out to work and stuff like that, you're not
Yeah.
in each other's company 24/7. So yeah, I
Yeah,
do get that.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So when did you decide, obviously you mentioned that you kind of had seen TikToks about ADHD and things like that. When did you
Mhm.
decide that actually that was something that maybe you wanted to get involved in terms of like TikTok and
Mm.
Instagram and stuff? When did you decide?
Um, I think I just sort of started like just posting silly videos about
Hmm.
my experience, just as a way to sort of like, I guess, process what I was learning and like experiencing. So I didn't start with the intention of like, I'm going to be a neurodivergent content creator. That wasn't
Yeah.
like on my radar. I was simply just sharing my experience because for me that was a way to process. I've since realized I'm definitely the kind of person that has to talk about something to process it, and that is what works for me, rather than just like thinking about it or ignoring it, or
Yeah.
so it was purely, it was almost like a therapeutic tool for me, I suppose, because it helped me sort of express what I was feeling. And then I found loads of people were like resonating with it and relating to it. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. I'm not just weird and the only person that does this. Literally thousands of other people do this as well.
Hmm.
So that was really, I guess, like, I don't know if validating is the right word, but for me and my experience, to recognize that I wasn't alone in that. And there's something so powerful about knowing that you're not alone in it.
Mm.
Um, that is ultimately what made me comfortable, like sort of coming to terms with and talking more about my Tourette syndrome, because I saw other people talking about it. So I like to think that I can be that person that those people were for me. And also, you know, if it does help people understand themselves more, then that's obviously like amazing. And if it can help people feel less alone and like they're not weird and they're not strange and they're not broken, then that's like an amazing thing, in my opinion. I mean, I've had so many messages from people saying, you know, oh, I've been following you for ages, and I've been to the doctor section. I've now been diagnosed with ADHD or autism or whatever it is, and you know, they're like really grateful and just thanking me for like the videos that I'm posting, which just seems like wild.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so nice to get those messages, because social media can just feel like you're sometimes just throwing stuff into the void and
Yeah.
seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess like unintentionally, accidentally, I grew quite a big following on TikTok in a very short period of time, which was really really strange, because it's not something I'd experienced before in terms of like having a bigger following. And I sort of went to having like maybe 1,000 followers to like 60, or however many I have, 68, maybe 1,000 followers in like a short, you know, in like a few months. So that was
Oh,
kind of
okay.
like, yeah. So that was like quite weird and quite overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, okay, I've got to the point now where I can't keep up with these comments. I can't read all of these messages. So you kind of go through this like phase of feeling very guilty that you now can't keep up with what these people probably followed you for.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way anymore. I have a very different relationship with social media now, which is good. But it is weird having a bigger following, because I think people feel this sense of like entitlement to your life, to know everything about you, to your time, to your energy. They feel as though they deserve answers to every single question they ask, even if there's 100 other comments asking the exact same thing that you've answered. But so I'm like, I find social media such a strange thing. It's a very love-hate relationship for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because I am very all or nothing in my thinking, it's something that I struggle to have boundaries with. So right now I'm on a bit of a break from social media, have been for a few weeks now,
Mm.
because it was kind of getting very overwhelming again. And when I find it gets to that point, I have to step back completely. And I can't just do a bit here and a bit there, because for some reason, I just can't do that. And it's been very helpful, and I feel in a much better place mentally. And I feel as though I can be in my real life more.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been able to do way more writing and that sort of thing, which has been very like fulfilling and good for my soul.
Okay.
But yeah, social media is a strange one. I recognized that it was something that I was like, I guess, addicted to. I think a lot of people don't really talk about that, or they don't like to admit to it, because there's a lot of shame around this idea of like being addicted to your phone.
Yeah.
But absolutely, I was, and I probably still am. I've now replaced social media with this game on my phone called Fishdom, and I'm obsessed. I'm
Incredible.
obsessed. Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. So I feel as though I do sort of have this very, I don't necessarily want to say addictive or obsessive, but this type of personality where I find something and then just hyperfixate on it, and that's very much my ADHD and autism.
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily something I can control. So I try and sort of like take away the layers of shame around that addiction to social media, because social media is literally a dopamine slot machine. So
Oh, yeah.
like you put, you know, ADHDers on there, of course they're going to be addicted to it. Of course they're going to become obsessed with it and have like, you know, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hours a day of screen time, because that is how it is made. Like
Yeah.
social media is made to have that effect on people.
Mhm.
I think it's something like, of all the sort of businesses in the world, only 2 of them call their customers users, and that is drugs and social media.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a really good documentary on Netflix about it, and I can't remember for the life of me what it's called now, but it's very good, and it's all about social media and how we're basically addicted to our phones and how it's created in that way.
Oh, okay, I'll have to look it up. I'll try
Yeah.
and put it in the show notes as well in case
Yeah,
anyone else
sorry, I
wants to
cannot
watch it.
remember the name of it, but
That's all right.
I should probably watch it again. But I feel like I'm on a complete tangent. But yeah, so I feel as though I have a very weird relationship with social media. I absolutely love it because without it, I genuinely wouldn't be where I am in terms of, you know, recognizing my neurodivergence, and even things like learning that I'm bisexual, or like so many things I attribute to being on social media.
Mhm.
A really big majority of my close friends are from social media. Like that's how I've met them. And some of my closest friends I haven't even met in real life, um, but have been friends with them on Instagram for like years.
Mhm.
And that is something that I am like so grateful for, and I'm so like so pleased that I have social media for those things. And then there's the other side of it that is not so fun, that comes with having a slightly, you know, bigger following, people that are just really not very nice, trolls, like nasty messages, nasty comments. I'm quite lucky in the sense that I haven't had too many of those. But I get quite bad RSD, which for anyone who doesn't know is very common in ADHD. It's rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So obviously everyone doesn't feel good when they feel a sense of rejection, but that is very much heightened in those with ADHD. And it's not even just like direct rejection, it's like anything that you perceive as rejection.
Mhm.
So that's something that I find very difficult being on social media, because even like the silliest of things can trigger that. So that is also something that I have to sort of be mindful of when I am using social media.
Mhm. And I think I remember you saying like you kind of refer to it as like one of your like energy leaks, which I
Yeah.
thought was like a really good way of putting it, in that it kind of, you know, drains you, and the fact that you're stepping back gives you
Mm-hmm.
that control of your energy again.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, so having a chronic illness, I have to be very mindful and very intentional with how I'm using my energy, because I don't have much of it.
Mhm.
And it's, you know, it's the same with being autistic. I don't have much physical or mental or emotional energy each day, and each day it can vary. Have you ever heard of spoon theory?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for anyone that doesn't know, it's essentially like you use the concept of spoons to describe your energy, so you can sort of keep track of your energy throughout the day. So let's say you start with 10 spoons a day. It might take 1 spoon to have a shower. It might take 5 spoons to socialize with someone. So very quickly you're using up those spoons. So for me, I have not many spoons every
Mhm.
day. And so I was really looking into, okay, where are the biggest energy leaks in my life? What uses the most spoons? And one of those things, even though I love it, was social media, because even when I wasn't actively like engaging with people, or, you know, replying to comments or messages, or actually creating content, just being on social media was an energy leak for me, because it was using spoons, because I was taking in a lot of information. And I believe autistic brains actually process, like, it's something like 40% more information than non-autistic people
Mhm.
whilst like at rest. So you know, all of this information that you're scrolling through on Instagram or TikTok, even if it's not conscious, it's taking up your like mental capacity, and it's taking up space and using spoons, for me anyway. So I realized that it was a big energy leak, so I had to do something about that so I can then use that energy somewhere else, somewhere that I'm choosing. So for me, that's like writing and reading, rather than just like mindlessly wasting it on doom scrolling.
Mm-hmm. And you kind of mentioned like writing and reading there, and I know that you also you make kind of like prints and stickers and do like poetry kind of things as well. So
Yeah.
it sounds like you're quite like all-round creative.
Yeah, I think like it's just something I've always loved. I have always loved reading books, always, like from when I could read. I love reading books. And I loved writing as well. And I've recently found like my first little mini story that I wrote, and I think I was about 6 or 7 years old. And it was this story about rescuing a dinosaur from a volcano island. And
Amazing.
yeah, so good. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll use that. But so I think like reading and writing subconsciously was always something that I could use as escapism, I guess, from like my feelings, or like how it feels to live in a world that isn't designed for you. And that absolutely was not a conscious thing. That's only sort of now in hindsight. That's what I mean when I say looking backwards, you can kind of connect the dots. I guess it's sort of like a coping mechanism, or, you know, a sense of escapism, escaping, you know, feeling certain ways, or, you know, having autistic shutdowns or meltdowns before getting to that point, going, okay, I'm going to read. And then you kind of immerse yourself in this different world that isn't yours, where you aren't feeling those things, where you aren't overloaded with all these different, you know, overstimulating things. So yeah, it's something I've always loved doing. So I kind of got to a point now where I was like, well, why don't I actually, you know, try and do something with this? So that's when I decided to do my degree in English Lit and Creative Writing. So now I write a lot of poetry. It's predominantly around sort of my experience within all the identities that I've kind of talked about and mentioned here, but also like feminism and just like the messiness of life. So my goal is to like write a book, or books plural, hopefully. I don't know when that will be. I don't know what it will be about. But that's what I would love to do, because I really love writing. It makes me feel, it's one of the only things that makes me feel calm, and that's something that I really struggle with. And I feel as though it's a way that I can express myself that I can't necessarily do safely in other ways. So it feels like a really wholesome therapeutic outlet that can, you know, maybe also land with other people as well, and they maybe resonate with that as well. So I've made a couple of poetry ebooks that are on my Etsy shop, and yeah, like you said, prints that I sold on there, and some stickers, and I also have a Substack which I'm really, really loving writing for at the moment. So that's kind of like replaced being on my social media. I find that I'm a lot better, or I prefer longer format content. So obviously Instagram and TikTok is very short snippets. Yeah. You can't really write much, you know. It used to be that you could have bigger captions on Instagram, and of course you can now, but people don't read them. So
yeah,
I really enjoy writing longer format. So I've had a lot of people sort of subscribe to me on there whilst I've been away from Instagram, because they still want to like keep up with what I'm doing and talking about and all the things that I'm writing. So that's been like, yeah, I'm really loving doing that.
Well, that's good. It almost sounds like a kind of healthier way for you to
Yes.
connect with your community, kind of thing.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like yeah, it feels healthier. It kind of feels, I don't necessarily want to use the word productive in the traditional sense of it, but it feels as though it has more purpose and more meaning to it, and it can be more open and honest, and it feels safer to write it in that like Substack community, because only people that want to be there and read my longer work are going to be there, and they're generally not the people that are going to be mean.
Yeah, and I guess also I feel like, especially on things like TikTok and maybe like Instagram Reels, people watch like 30 seconds, 60 seconds of your content and think they know you as a person, and it's just like, well, no.
Yeah, that's literally 10 seconds of my life. There is this sort of weird, I think it's called like parasocial relationships, isn't it? Where like all these people think they know you because they see all this stuff about you, but they don't, because obviously we're all just choosing what we share on social media.
Yeah.
And I share a lot. I'm very, I guess, probably a bit too open, bit of an oversharer. But even so, I'm not sharing every meltdown I have, and I'm not sharing every time that I can't get up because I'm so depressed, or I'm not sharing everything on social media, because some of the best and worst times that I have, I don't think to put it on social media, so it's
Why would you?
well, exactly. So yeah, people definitely have this sort of idea that they watch one tiny little snippet and then they know your entire life and make one judgment off of that, which is, I guess, the nature of the beast. But
yeah, that's very true. I was going to ask you as well about kind of your hobbies and special interests. Obviously, I know that these overlap a lot with kind of things you've already mentioned, like kind of reading and poetry and writing and stuff like that. But you are a dog mum, and we need to talk about dogs.
Oh my God,
it's Harold.
Yes, Harold. Yes. He's currently like curled up below my feet under my desk. Just before we recorded this, we went out for a quick walk, so he's puffing away, so you hopefully can't hear him. But yeah, he is just my life. He is my soulmate. I love him so much. We got him when we moved into a house, so 2.5 years ago. And we kind of we knew we wanted a dog, but we sort of got him impulsively. This was before I was diagnosed with ADHD, so it makes sense. But he has been so good for my mental health. He's not a support dog, but he
is.
Yeah, he can't. He is in a way, like when he wants to be. But he has been such a help to me. And I think as well because when we first got him, my husband was working at an office every day, so I wasn't alone all the time because I had Harold. But now my husband's changed jobs, so he's home most of the time, which is great. But I still have Harold, and that's like I just can't even explain it. I just love him so much. Like I would die for this dog. I love him so much, and he's a real great support. If I have a meltdown, he'll come over to me and he's kind of sitting there like, it's okay, I'm here. And it's obviously he doesn't talk. That would be great, but sadly that's I do sometimes ask him. I'm like, look, this is the chance. If you can talk, you can tell me. I won't tell anyone. It'll be our secret.
Yeah, but, I promise.
So far, no, he doesn't. But he is brilliant. He is hard work, I won't lie. And I do quite often have messages from other, specifically autistic people, and sometimes ADHD, asking like what it's like to have a dog as a neurodivergent person. Because it can be a lot sometimes, and it can be overstimulating. Probably, similar way as I imagine it is to people having kids. Like I imagine that is extremely overstimulating. One of the reasons I've decided I don't want kids, because I don't think I could handle that. And yeah, it is amazing having a dog, and it's really hard sometimes. It was particularly hard when he was a puppy. They sometimes want attention when you're feeling already overstimulated, and that can get very annoying. When I get overstimulated, I feel very angry. So I sometimes have to remove myself from the situation so that I can just be alone and just calm myself down a bit. And then also in terms of having a chronic illness, it's sometimes a challenge to get out to walk him, which is why I'm lucky that I have my husband, so he can walk him on those days that I can't or I'm not able to. But absolutely the positives outweigh the challenges. And I think more so he has supported me in managing my disabilities rather than like hindered me.
That's good. And again, it's kind of, there's obviously pros and cons to owning a dog, and the fact that, you know, the companionship and they're always excited to see you and all these things. But, you know, there is, you know, the responsibility of, you know, not only feeding yourself, but feeding him, and remembering stuff like that is...
Do you know what? It's so strange because, like, with my ADHD and autism, like, feeding myself is something that I have quite a hard time with. Whether it is like the ADHD side and like remembering, or the autistic side and not realizing that I'm hungry, or being hungry, being able to cook, but then the texture's not right, so I can't eat it. So, but it's weird how with Harold, I just know he has to be fed. He has to be walked. These things they have to be done or he'll die. So like, I know that would be the same for me, but for some reason there feels like there's more urgency looking after this other living thing. So I do feel as though that gives me like a sense of purpose.
I guess also he gives you signals when he's hungry, kind of thing.
Oh,
they know.
They say dogs don't understand time. My dog can tell the time. I swear to God, he will sit at me and be like, hello, my dinner is due in 3 minutes. Like, so yeah, they definitely do give you signals, which is helpful. I hadn't thought about that before, but yeah, that's helpful. And it's not just like a reminder on your phone that you can swipe away. Like, you have to go and do it because otherwise it's just going to sit and stare at you. But definitely, I think he has also helped with like having a routine for myself, which I've realized is really, really important for me. It's always something I resisted because I hate the idea of routine because of my ADHD brain, but I do really well with routine because I'm autistic. So it's kind of it's a constant battle having both, I think.
It sounds like it.
It's very it's like you're constantly kind of at odds with yourself. It's really, really bizarre. And I think personally that's why I was undiagnosed for a long time, because they sort of cancel each other out in terms of how it manifests to other people, like being able to see it. Anyway, gone off on another tangent there.
No, it's hard not to. So I can't believe we've almost on for an hour. It's gone so quick. I always say this. But do you want to mention again where people can sign up for your newsletter and like your social media handles and stuff? Because I'll pop them in the show notes as well.
Of course. Follow you. So my Instagram is at Georgia Holliday _ Holiday is spelt with 2 L's because my husband has a just difficult last name. Just decided to be different. So that's my Instagram, and in the link in my bio there has the links to all of the other things, to my TikTok, to my Substack, to my Etsy. So that's probably like the best way to go, so you can find everything rather than having like a million links.
Okay.
But my Substack is called Georgia Writes. I do have a separate Instagram page for Georgia Writes, which I have actually been like posting a little bit to whilst I've been on my social media break, because it just doesn't hold the same kind of responsibility. It feels. I think it's because like I have significantly less followers on there, so it doesn't feel as I don't know, like exposed, or like I have a responsibility. I don't know. So I post some like my poems on there and stuff. So you're also welcome to go and follow that. That's just Georgia Writes. But all of the links are on my Instagram.
Amazing. I will make sure to is it like a link tree
kind of thing? Yes.
Okay, fab. I will put that in the notes. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been really interesting. I feel like we could chat for another hour, basically.
100%. Like once I get going, it's hard to stop me. Like, especially if it's, you know, talking about like my special interests. So for me, like ADHD and autism is part of my special interest. So yeah. But I've loved chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Likewise, it's been really interesting, and maybe in the future we'll have to kind of catch up with you and see how things are going.
Yeah, 100%,
I
definitely.
always find that really interesting to be in, like, I don't know, like a year's time or
Yeah,
something, or a few
where are
months'
they
time.
now?
Yeah, literally. It's honestly fascinating. I'm like, so did you do the thing you wanted to do? Like,
Yeah.
and also, like, in terms of, like, you know, social media following and stuff, like,
Yeah,
people
totally.
tend to, like, be like, oh, I've grown too much and I don't know how, and
Yeah.
it's always interesting. But yeah, thanks again for coming on.
Of course. Thank you for having me.